Have you been waiting for news on the Nikon Z8 or the Nikon Z30? Details coming up, but first I encourage you to subscribe and choose all notifications so you're kept informed on the latest camera gear, news, and rumors. And those two cameras, one of them will be an APS-C camera, most likely the Nikon Z30, and the other will be a full-frame camera, and this is where things kind of break down. Now, Nikon Rumors is the site that follows all things Nikon in terms of rumors and news, and what they're saying is they're a little bit confused. They're not really sure what's going to be coming out. Well, there is an opportunity that we could have an entry-level full-frame camera like the Z4 or the Z5 Mark II. Certainly that is a possibility, but what a lot of us are waiting for is this mythical camera, this unicorn-like camera called the Nikon Z8. What about a Nikon Z8? Well, this is what Nikon Rumors had to say about that. I never liked those Nikon Z8 rumors. It's just too early for Nikon to start cannibalizing their Z9 sales. The Nikon Z9 is a terrific camera. It can shoot up to 120 frames per second stills or 20 frames per second lossless at 45.7 megapixels with a data transfer rate of 1.2 gigabytes per second. And video, 8K up to 60 frames per second. It has Apple ProRes in 4K. It's truly an amazing camera, and it's priced at $54.96. Now, in terms of pricing of the Z8, we know that the Nikon Z6 Mark II is around $2,000, $1999 or $1996. And the Z7 Mark II is priced at, let me just check the price. Today's price is $28.96. So there's definitely room for a camera like the Z8 to be priced between what the Nikon Z7 Mark II is and, of course, the Nikon Z9. But, well, here's what else Nikon Rumors had to say about this. My confusion here comes from the fact that we already have the Nikon Z7 Mark II. Nikon has to either abandon the Nikon Z7 line and release the Z8 or improve the Nikon Z7 line. I simply do not see how these two product lines can coexist. I get the confusion over at Nikon Rumors because, well, I'm a little bit confused myself. We have the Nikon Z6 Mark II, and it's more or less a video-centric version, a full-frame mirrorless camera offering 4K at 30 frames per second. Then at $28.96, we have the Nikon Z7 Mark II. It has a 45.7 megapixel sensor, the same sensor found in the Nikon Z9, and can shoot 10 frames per second. And then, of course, we have the flagship camera, the Nikon Z9, at just under $5,500 that can shoot 120 frames per second stills at 11 megapixels, or at full sensor, 45.7 megapixels, lossless RAW. It can shoot 20 frames per second with 1.2 gigabytes per second data. That's an awful lot of data being moved over to the CF Express card. So $5,500, and we have the Nikon Z7 at $28.96. Now, if I was Nikon, here's what I'd be looking at doing. I would definitely come out with a Mark III for the Z6 and the Z7. There's plenty of room to do that. But the Z8, where I would price that is maybe about $600 more than the current camera, the Nikon Z7 Mark II. So let's say around $34.99. That's still $400 less than the Canon EOS R5, but significantly less than the Nikon Z9. I wouldn't give it 8K 60. I would give it 8K 30 RAW. Nikon RAW, doesn't really matter which one. I might offer Apple ProRes, again, just in 4K, but in terms of stills, I would give it 20 frames per second. I wouldn't give it nearly as fast as a buffer, and that's definitely one way they can differentiate the two cameras. Now, in terms of pricing, that's still quite a difference in price between $5,500 and, of course, $3,400. And that price of $3,400 is right around the price of the Sony a7S III. So let's look at the video capabilities just a little bit more. 8K oversampled 4K is what you can do with a 45.7 megapixel sensor, and that gives very detailed video. It's going to be right up with the Canon EOS R5, and it's going to beat out the Sony a7S III, but it's also going to give you a faster stills rate. Look at the Nikon Z7 Mark II. It can only do about 10 frames per second, although it's at 45.7 megapixels. So what are you getting for an extra $600? You're getting a camera that can shoot faster, that can shoot stills faster, that can shoot better video, more detailed video at higher frame rates. The Nikon Z6 Mark II can only do 4K at 30 frames per second. And sure, Nikon could come out in the Mark III and give it 4K 60, whether cropped or not, and it's still not going to approach what the Z8 would do with 8K up to 30 frames per second and a much faster buffer speed that we have in the Z9 for stills, still giving it room to improve its capabilities for $600 over the Z6 Mark II or even a successor, the Z7 Mark II. So it's giving Nikon room to update both the Z6 Mark II and the Z7 Mark II, introduce the Z8, and still not cannibalize the Nikon Z9. See, when I was looking at starting this channel, I was looking at updating my camera, and I eventually picked the Canon EOS R5. Now, the Canon EOS R5 does overheating, and that's one thing I'd expect to have fixed in the Nikon Z8. But when I was looking at the R5, I looked at the price and I thought, wow, $37.99, $38.99, this is very expensive. This is the most I can afford to spend on a camera. And I eventually bought it. But when I look at Canon's 1 series at $6,500, I wasn't even going to touch that. It was so far out of my price range. And I think that's what Nikon might do here is look at the Z6 Mark II, the Z7 Mark II, even with a successor update in the Mark III and for both cameras, and you still have room for a camera that can produce better video, 8K oversample 4K, giving you that detail, giving you log profiles, giving you better dynamic range, giving you better ISO performance, but still not touching the flagship camera, not giving you that same buffer. So when it comes to stills, if you want the best of the best, you're going to go with the Z9. If you want 20 frames per second, you're going to go with the Z8. If you're happy with 10 frames per second or 12 frames per second at 45 megapixels, you can go with the Z7 Mark II or even Mark III and save a few dollars. But what do you think? What do you think Nikon's going to do? I definitely think it makes an awful lot of sense for them to come out with a Z8 and to do so without cannibalizing the Z9. There's plenty of room in terms of price between the Z7 Mark II and the Nikon Z9. There's plenty of room for capability improvements over the Z6 Mark III. I should say, let me try that again, over the Z6 Mark II, and even allow room for a Z6 Mark III, and the same for the Z7 Mark II, allowing for a Z7 Mark III and then coming out with a Z8. Certainly makes an awful lot of sense to me, but let me know in the comment section down below what you think Nikon's going to do. And in terms of those two cameras we have coming out this year, the Nikon Z30 and a Nikon Z8, what do you think we're going to see? Will we see the Nikon Z30 for an APS-C? And for the full frame, will we see a Nikon Z4, a Nikon Z5 Mark II, or a Nikon Z8? Or what about all of the above? Anyhow, so that's it. Oh, one last thing before I let you go. If you do want to stay up to date on the latest news and rumors, especially when it comes to the Nikon Z8, the Nikon Z4, the Nikon Z5 Mark II, or a Nikon Z30, or maybe you want to know more about the Canon EOS R1 that's supposed to be coming out, go ahead and subscribe, but make sure you choose all notifications, because when you choose all notifications, YouTube will notify you as soon as I publish a video, so that way you can stay up to date on the latest camera news and rumors without having to search over Instagram, Twitter, various YouTube channels, and of course, websites. That's it for now. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again soon.